Hello there, everybody. It's Dave here again from SALT Sport and Life Training, and we welcome you to the 14th edition of the SALT Lunchbox. And we also welcome people on Facebook Live, which has been another great platform that's been getting some big numbers tuning in, which is terrific. For those who might be tuning in for the first time, I'm the founder of SALT Sport and Life Training. Typically, we're in clubs at this time doing wellbeing, leadership, positive coaching and so on. But at the moment, we're using this opportunity to really grow our craft in regard to online presenting and hopefully help us expand right across the country through this medium. The aim of this lunchbox is to inspire and connect, to inspire you to take away at least one thing. We know we've got a diverse audience listening in, so we always say to our guests that we've got to have a range of different tools and anchors that people can take away from today. And we also are encouraging you to connect more closely with those who you love and with the people who are tuning in. We'll have James again as our moderator. He'll be answering any questions and perhaps feeding a few of them onto us. We might throw to him at some stage too, just to give us an update on what people are saying. We'd love you to be really involved. Last week, a lot of people were involved, but only the panelists could see what they were saying. So please make sure that if you have a question or a comment that you make it available to all attendees. There's a little button at the bottom of your screen to do that with. We could not do what we do without the generous support of our sponsors, Eastland, Bendigo Bank and FC Business Solutions. So we thank them again for their wonderful support. And as I mentioned, I think for the first time last week, that coming next Monday, we'll be releasing our wellbeing sessions into clubs online, clubs or businesses. It'll be a 1 hour presentation. I'm absolutely wrapped in how it's looking. It's really going to be a case of less is more. So how do we get through COVID? What are we doing in regard to our physical, our social, our emotional? How do we look out for our mates? How do we stay connected during this period of time? So I'll put the details up for that at the end. Today we're going to hear from Glen Fisher on the topic of habits and rituals. He's going to be talking about how we develop our character muscles. And, you know, having spent half an hour talking to him on Friday, I'm really excited about the depth of knowledge that I know he's going to bring. And in fact, the greatest challenge for Glen is how is he going to get through his vast array of information in such a short time. So welcome, Glen, and tell us, how did you get into this whole area of habits and rituals?
Yeah, how did I get into it? A long story short, mate, it came about from quite an accident. So I had an opportunity to be mucking around at elite level sport. We had a coach who left us, and oddly enough, our performance left us. So I needed to figure out, what did that coach have? Because we were the athletes. Why did our performance all of a sudden become so much harder? So that literally has set up my entire career, just chasing the answer to, you know, how do I get performance time and time again? So,
fantastic. So tell us about what you do and some of the principles, because I found them fascinating the other day.
Yeah, mate. So if you like, let me just kick off and get straight into that, if that works for you. Yeah, will that work? Yeah?
That is fantastic.
All right, let's see if the screen share comes up. Is that working or no? Doesn't look like it is.
No, because you know why?
You booted me off before.
Well, no, maybe because, oh no, I'm not sharing my screen. So yes, yeah, I can see it now. I can see the full version.
Here it comes up.
That's the one.
Yeah. So let's have a look at this. So one of the things that we had to learn as we were rowers is this, you know, everyone's heard of the Pavlov's dog experiment. You know, there's a stimulus, the scientist rings a bell, and then there's the dog salivates and there's a response to that. One of the things we found is, and our sport was in surf lifesaving, Dave, is that often our habits and our response to competition was more reactionary, very unproductive. And the former coach had taught us a whole heap of behaviours, but we hadn't actually taken ownership of those behaviours. So there was a space between the stimulus and response that was missing for us. So What does that mean? So if you look at surfboat rowing, which is what the sport that we're involved in, there are so many decisions that happen in surfboat rowing, from the start of the race where you're holding the boat in a surf, then you've got to jump into that boat when the gun goes, or is there a wave underneath you? You've got 5 other people in that boat. Then you go rowing, and then all of a sudden, you're also in some surf that you're facing in this case, about a 10-foot wave that we had to navigate. So there's a lot of pressure, a lot of fatigue, so many choices, but we were not aware of a lot of the choices. So we practiced a hell of a lot. But what happened is that coach when he left us, he took this space that's in between stimulus and response, and a lot of our deliberate practice was there, but there was a whole heap of practice that we weren't conscious that he used to teach us. So what did he do differently such that we could then kind of replicate it? So I did some work with an organization called Stephen Covey, 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. And in the space in between the stimulus and response, he talked about these 4 gifts that kind of set us apart from the rest of the animal kingdom. And this coach actually had just kept playing at each of these dimensions: awareness, imagination, conscious, and self-control. He was exercising those muscles, if you like, on a day-to-day session with us, a practice session with us. And he was doing that far more than when we were, just with another coach. So he was practicing these things time and time again. What does that mean? In particular, he was teaching us, running us through activities around this idea of self-control. And what does that mean? What I'd love you to look at is this first definition here: our ability to regulate our feelings, thoughts, behavior, particularly when we're faced with pressure. So if you think about the COVID situation, I just introduced my dog, Shadow.
Oh, we love it. We just go with the flow.
If you think about the COVID situation, it's produced, a brand new pressure on everybody. So it doesn't matter whether you're doing a sport, running a business, or running a family. There's a whole range of new pressures, temptations, and, if you like, impulses. So I don't know about you guys, but working from home every single day, my clients are sharing with me, and I'm finding the same trouble. I have a teenage daughter who loves to bake a lot. So the smells wafting in from the kitchen are a new pressure point for me and my choices on my nutrition and what I'm planning to do or not do. But self-control, if you like, burns energy. And if you think about the more tired we become because we're using lots of self-control throughout the day, when we want to do and choose great habits for, be again, our sport or just our nutrition, it becomes more and more difficult because we're on Zoom meetings all day. We're being tempted with all sorts of things. So every time we use self-control, we are burning lots of energy. Every time we're regulating our thoughts, we are burning lots of energy. And this is something I wanted to share with you just quickly. I'm not going to go into depth here, just very quickly. It's like your brain has 3 different brain systems kind of going on. Something we call the chimp brain, if you look down the bottom. It's very much our emotional brain. It's just got this chatter always going on. I'll talk a little bit more about that in a second. Then we've got this professor, the very logical kind of brain, lots of reason. And then we've got this computer brain, which is trying to automate and create habits for us. Because if we didn't create habits, we'd just be overloaded time and time again, yeah? Here's the challenge. Each of us, every single athlete on the planet, every single person on the planet has this brain battle going on because they all have a different goal in mind. The chimp is fighting for survival and acceptance. It wants to be seen and heard, and it's kind of like your kids having a tantrum. The professor, on the other hand, is looking for meaning, understanding, and logic. And as I said before, the computer is trying to generate efficiency, create habits. The challenge for all of us, particularly under pressure and fatigue, is that this battle is going on. There's this circular pressure going on, and in particular, if we think, sorry, I'll just go back. There's a dance going on between the chimp and the professor a hell of a lot. And a little insight on the chimp for a second. The chimp is about five times more powerful than the professor. It speaks much like, it's very strong, influencing what the computer should automate. It stores a lot of emotional memory into that space. So it's always battling with the professor. You know, when we're under fatigue, have you ever felt like this, Dave? Yeah, at the back end of a day and you think, hey, listen, I'm just going to go, I don't know, I'm going to go dry for 5 days. I'm not going to have a glass of wine before, before Friday, maybe. But you've had a really, really tough day at work. So, your professor set this goal that says, listen, I don't want a glass of wine. But the chimp says at the back end of a really tired, stressful, fatigued day, hey, listen, you deserve a glass of wine. Have you ever felt like that?
Yes, except instead of a glass of wine, we've got a McDonald's about 200 meters away.
Yeah, okay. So we've all got this battle kind of going on, and the chimp, I guess what a lot of people don't understand is this chimp is very, very noisy. It's always chatting in there. We hear thoughts, we hear emotions. That's the chimp talking. And if we're going to form habits, I just love people to understand that there is this battle going on, and we need to do something to help get the chimp on board to automate the habits we want versus the habits that we don't want, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that's great.
I look back on one of your previous sessions, Dave, and I noticed Edwina, I think, talked about the All Blacks. So I thought I'd give you an example. This is grammatically incorrect, but the All Blacks are the most winningest team on the planet. And this comes off the back of a reputation for choking at the World Cup. But they happen to win a couple of World Cups, back to back. And one of their character muscles, you see down the bottom left-hand side, these are all their muscles of character that they really go after to strengthen their identity. They call it strength. So to wear that All Black jersey, you must have a strength in your character and everything you do. Now, let me just give you an example of how they've addressed the professor and the chimp and the battle that goes on. If I break that down, that character muscle of strength, the way they define it, the ability to perform under pressure, just like us, we have different types of pressure maybe, but they want to perform under pressure. So at the World Cup, they used to not perform well under pressure. In fact, their language for it is they called it a red head. They let the pressure get to them and they focused on the wrong thing, and their thinking got, instead of being clear and calm, it got really confused and emotional, and the chimp was winning out on the battle. So they said, we need to get better at the World Cup. Oddly enough, every other tournament, they were great at blue head, clear, calm thinking. But under the World Cup situation, they started thinking about the result way too much. So what did they do? So they started talking about how do we transition out of the habit of a red head to the habit of a blue head. And this is how they did it. There's a simple pathway that you can look at, 3 dimensions. Awareness, we need to create an anchor to that great habit that we want, and then we need to act on that great habit. Yeah, and I visually represent the anchor here as the space between stimulus and response. We need to associate something with the behavior that we want to do under pressure. Because you think about it, under pressure, if you're trying to invent or create a new habit, very unlikely we're going to do it. So we need to have associated that new behavior with something that's going to trigger us. Simple example. If you look at if you stand in front of your vanity mirror of any time during the day, if you just stand and looked at yourself, I'm willing to bet that you'd probably have an urge to either comb your hair or run your fingers through your hair, or even if you don't have hair, you probably run your hand over your head just to feel how much spike you've got. Or you feel like cleaning your teeth. If you like, and it may not be time to clean your teeth, but the mirror acts as an example. The vanity acts as an example of something we've done time and time again, and it triggers you to want to do a particular behavior, a productive habit. So what does this look like for the All Blacks? And I'll give you their captain, his example. This is literally what they did. They broke it down. Imagine these are little post-it notes sitting up on a board, if you like. So the awareness was in a particular game, particularly a World Cup game or a high-pressure game, notice what does your redhead look like. And, he would start getting angry, his eyes would narrow, and this was something he needed to understand. And each of the players needed to understand, what does their redhead look like? And then Richie McCaw, his anchor was actually to stamp his feet into the turf really, really hard. And by doing that, it triggered the behavior that he practiced time and time again at home on the paddock of how do we turn the ball over in this situation. So stamping his feet triggered that calm, clear head that he had practiced many, 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 many times. One of the other players looked into the stands. So his anchor was looking into the stands at a very, very distant space. Another one's looked to the scoreboard. The anchor was the scoreboard. Whatever stadium, it was the scoreboard. But when they looked at that scoreboard, they went through a little process of what does a clear head sound like? How do you turn the ball over based on this situation that they practiced time and time again? And then they went ahead and acted on that. So, and a key part to remember here is when you're trying to move habits out of being really, really stressed to being really, really calm, is you've got to remind yourself, what is the reward here? So whether you have an angry behavior that you don't want, or you have a calm behavior that you do want, both of them have the same reward. And in their case, by yelling at someone, his reward was control. If I yell at my players, I will get control. But he also knew he would lose respect from his players if he yelled at his players. So he needed control, but he needed to do it in such a way that the players would listen and they would all come together. So that's one way the All Blacks did it. So if you like, a simple way to break this down is awareness is noticing what is the thought or the feeling that you're having. And we like to use a bit of language to say, I notice that I'm feeling a little angry. I notice anger. Not that I am angry, I notice I'm angry. And then we have the anchor. Is it a behavioral cue? Is it a thought cue? Is it a sound cue? Or maybe a time of day? Some smokers that we coach at 10 o'clock, they normally go for a smoker break or something like that. So time is their trigger. So when it comes to 10 o'clock, what's my behavioral cue that I need to exhibit? Does that make sense so far?
Yeah. 11 o'clock, cup of coffee.
Yeah, beautiful. Yeah. So this is kind of what it looks like. We're trying to break down the space between stimulus and response. And the work is in designing our habits in the middle here. And it's trying to, each and every session, how do we get disciplined on that awareness, the imagination around the kind of solutions that are going to work for us, the respect for one another, and then practicing it time and time again, such that if I'm facing a 10-foot wave in my rowing boat, I'm not trying to think up how best to shift the boat and be fast in that moment. I've practiced so many times, but I've got automatic cues to help me kind of get there. I can share another example. We talked about the wine one. Another athlete that we have, so we work with a swim squad, Dave, who, she feels a little bit of pressure and anxiety from time to time. And so, she's trying to figure out, okay, how do I manage, that pressure and anxiety when I'm in the middle of a race? So she practices under race conditions, on a regular, frequent basis. And her awareness is noticing that she has hot cheeks when a lot of her negative self-talk, unproductive self-talk kicks in. And she often says to herself, I'm struggling right now. So she came up with a little cue and her language was just eat my bubbles. So she had this visual in her head around her bubbles from her feet and this saying, eat my bubbles. But she also said her cue was, I'm going to do that with a little bit of a smile on my dial, such that she put herself into a much more positive frame of mind, productive frame of mind, to execute the long stroke that she needed to swim fast, if that makes sense. So her anchor was a little bit of self-talk, eat my bubbles. But she did it with a smile to shift her mood, because if you think about the awareness of being really angry and frustrated, it's quite a negative, unproductive mood. What's going to have your muscles if you're angry? You're yelling at your players. You're yelling at each other on the paddock. You're yelling at your kids for not doing what you want them to do. So she thought, okay, I've got to calm my chimp down, and my chimp is emotional. How do I just actually smile while I'm saying? In fact, she can't say eat my bubbles without really cracking a smile. So if she's in a race pressure situation and she says eat my bubbles, it just physiologically changes her in a heartbeat. And then she visualizes a powerful kick. And if she's got a powerful kick, it means that her legs just mean business, and then she's off. So she's just kicking it. Yeah. So
to interrupt, I think, Glenn, because I just knew that we would never get through as much as I would like for us to get through. And we've only got 8 minutes to go, and we haven't introduced Larice. So join us when you're ready, Larice. But I'd love, we were talking on Friday about some real practical things during COVID, where I know you set your alarm to go off. I think it's every 50 minutes, and you have a whole range of then things that you can do. So just bringing this all back to the COVID area that we're in, and working from home, and the likelihood that we might get into some negative habits, what could be some really constructive things that we could do, or that you do or coach for us during this time?
Oh, were you asking me or Larice then? Sorry.
No, I'm asking you because I know what you were telling me the other day, and it was helpful. Yeah.
So I literally do. So one of the things that a lot of feedback I've been getting from my clients was back-to-back Zoom meetings or Teams meetings, and I found myself a little bit caught in that same trap. And so we talk in our business with our clients about moving somewhere between 50 and 90 minutes, but I was finding the feedback from clients is that they were starting earlier because they didn't have to commute. So we would set the cue was the alarm on my phone. You can see a visual there. It's set up every 50 minutes to ping. And we try and keep meetings to 45 minutes if we can. And so when that alarm goes, I've got a list of 12 habits that sit already designed about what am I going to do in that 5 to 10 minutes before my next Zoom meeting or Teams meeting. So I choose, a habit to help me just stay on track. Because if I don't have that list of habits in front of me, what do you think happens?
You just go to the next meeting, or you answer?
I do. It's too hard to think about what I do. Should I get something to eat, or should I breathe for a second, or should I just walk into the backyard? Or it's too hard. But if that list is kind of there for me, just to keep getting up off my bottom, it makes a massive difference. So
tell me what's on your list. What are some of those 12 things?
One of them is actually just even grabbing the two dogs. So we have two dogs. So I'll grab them, I'll put them on the lead and actually walk around the block. It takes about 12 minutes to do so. So if I've got that amount of time and I can get them out and about, so we'll just do it, even a little light run around the block. You'll see on the screen there, I've got box breathing as one of those options, or ratio breath. So it could be 4 breaths in, 4 breaths out. It's another one I might do, but I'll actually go into the yard to do that where I've got a bit of fresh air and sunlight on me. I might walk back into the backyard. We've got a pool, and I'll dip my feet. So the temperature of that pool has dropped significantly in the last few weeks. So I'll actually stimulate my nervous system by just putting my legs into the pool, because I'm not wearing shoes or I'm not wearing long pants or anything like that. I can go and stimulate like that. So there's a number of examples.
Fantastic. Welcome, Larice. We've only got 5 minutes left, and I'm so sorry, but Glenn could have listened to the next 2 hours. Did you want to add anything, Larice? Thanks for joining us.
Yeah, thank you very much, Dave. That was great, Glenn, as well. I think my reflections there is, I followed BJ Fogg with Tiny Habits, and one of the things that he talks about is just as you put your feet down on the floor every morning, is to say this is going to be a great day. And I find that through my own discussions and experiences right now with people in in isolation of really simplifying things because they're not able to go much beyond that. That's been one great practice for me. And the other thing, I absolutely love putting it on the phone. I too have a reminder on the phone that goes off, and I change the time every day or every week in my gratitude moment. And in that, I sit and practice a gratitude. So keeping it really short and simple right now has been really important, I think, right now in this time. And like Melanie had said, to breathe, you'd said just that, 10 breaths, sit there for 30, 60 seconds and breath, really important right now. Yeah, so that's been my reflection, Dave.
Yeah.
Terrific. I'm going to just share my screen. Hang on, am I sharing the right screen? Yes, I am. Fantastic. 3 takeaways from today. And the first one you can see there, identify that there is a battle going on in the brain. Number 2, at times we will relapse, and we didn't really get a chance to talk much about this into bad habits, but just accepting that that's the human condition, and it's never too late to start again and form new habits. And number 3, bad habits give us a reward as well. We need to find new ways to meet those needs productively. I remember we used to talk about that viable and satisfying alternative. I'd like to still find the one that is viable and satisfying instead of chicken chips. And so thank you. And the call to action for today, design your habits before the desire occurs. Glenn was talking about you can't work out how to get through a wave when you're halfway up it. Design an anchor for that new habit, a trigger, something in your mind that says, when this happens, my alarm goes off, or it's this time of day, or I meet that particular person, or I get out of bed, as Larissa was saying. This is how I respond. And earlier we were talking about how long does it take to form a new habit, and there's different theories of 21 days and 28 days. But Glenn was actually saying, look, you can start to change your behaviours over that period of time, but to really deeply ingrain something, depending on how hard it is, might take you 6 months. And then, it really is literally something that you do. I know for myself that to exercise is not even something that I think about. I've been doing it my entire life. Every day I have to do some form of exercise. It's deeply entrenched. Imagine if I could do the same for some other really great habits. Moving right along, on Wednesday we have a good friend of mine, Corin Jacker, and he's going to have a very practical session for us. We've had some theory that applies to lots of things, but this is quite specific, and that's with all of the incentives that have been provided for us financially, and all of the problems that might be occurring for us financially. How do we find our way through and maximise what we can gain and produce for ourselves financially? So that'll be Corin on Wednesday, and it won't just be a dry set of facts. I know we can read things in the papers, but he'll have some really practical stories and ways that we can do that. So we are coming near to the end. We once again thank our partners, Bendigo Bank, FC Business Solutions, and Eastland. If you do miss a session and you'd like to catch up on them, you can go to our website and link to our YouTube channel, which will give you opportunity to see them again. I'd be really interested in your feedback too. I'm feeling recently like we're rushing to get through half an hour, and there was so much more that we could cover. Would you listen if it was for an hour? Would you prefer it to be an hour? And would you prefer a different time slot? Would you like it to be 7:30 or 8 o'clock at night? We're open to all of this. We're still finding our way. So any feedback would be greatly appreciated. I could see that the live chat was talking about the 1970 grand final. I couldn't follow it, but there was Des Tuddenham and Teddy Hopkins being mentioned, and I think that had something to do with Les Twentyman. Not sure what it was all about. I'm sure it was a lot of fun, though. Our online course I mentioned earlier, you can either contact me or you can see Scott Angove, scott.angove there at Sport and Life Training. Scott works for us up in Ballarat. He's going to be helping us to conduct wellbeing and mental health into clubs. We've already got bookings starting to come in. We're really excited about what that's going to provide in this space. The number for Lifeline, as we always put up, is there, knowing that we can always ring 24/7 if we're in crisis. So we want to thank you. And Glenn, gosh, I wish we could have had you longer. And Larice, thank you. We didn't hear enough of you. But if people are interested, again, to go to Peripheral Vision. .net. Have I got that right, Glenn?
Yes, you have, mate. Yes, you have.
Peripheralvision.net to hear more about what Glenn offers to organisations. Thank you, everybody. Stay safe, stay connected. Remember that we will come out of this stronger, better, richer in the things that really matter. Thanks. Bye for now.